Greetings, fellow thinkers and drinkers, and on this occasion, film fans. I have long intended to introduce a cinematic and also literary aspect to this channel. I just haven't been able to get around to it yet, but you know how it is. There are only so many hours in the day. However, as one of my favorite films, all-time favorite films, has turned 50 this year, in fact last month, I thought it would be as good occasion as any to start. No prizes for guessing what I'm talking about, and that would be the legendary Jaws. Jaws, yeah, in some ways I think this is a perfect film. And I know, well, even before the 50th anniversary, YouTube is full of documentaries and commentaries and dedicated channels about it, and quite rightly so. It deserves it. So I have a feeling that just about everything has been said about the film, but perhaps not everybody has yet said it. So I'll try and keep this short and just give a few details of why I think it is so special. It Well, it's just superbly entertaining. And it is one of those perhaps all too rare occasions where the film version is vastly superior to the novel it's based upon. That doesn't happen often, if at all. But when they took this, when they took the book and prepared to film it, they took all the turgid, predictable, love story elements and all that out of it. Realized, there's a damn good story to tell here. And as we know, those 2 hours just fly by. It's perfectly paced in many ways. I would say there is not a wasted scene, not a wasted line of dialogue in this movie. Everything contributes to the story. And having said that, just because it's well paced doesn't mean it is shallow. It is not. We'll talk about the characters in a moment, but no, this is it's a very complete film in many ways. I don't think you can actually point to any aspect of filmmaking, and in reference to Jaws, and say, in this instance, it is lacking. It's got a really slow build up. Well, it doesn't have a really slow build up, but it's got a perfectly paced build up, I would have to say. Showing you enough, not showing you enough, letting the story develop. Just enough to get you hooked. Pun very much intended. It also introduces a universal fear factor. I mean, good God. Ever since watching this, it almost makes one forget one's fear of going to the dentist, doesn't it? You'd much rather go to the dentist than you would go swimming in the ocean. It just taps into that primal fear, what's in the unknown. Yeah, I mean, shark attacks were nothing new, but nothing brought it to the public conscious the way this film was done. Now, apparently, this has been unfortunate for the species itself, who are not to blame for anything. But I think, on the other hand, it's also led to a rise in awareness and conservation of the species as well. So hopefully that has evened itself out. It's just got enough jump scares in it to make it a horror film. Otherwise, it's a thriller, isn't it? It's a suspenseful thriller, but those jump scares. And I think, the more or less every attack. Chrissy swimming in the beginning. Well, I suppose you kind of know what's coming. You know what the film's about. And there she is swimming in the water, and you see the view from below. Perhaps that's not a jump scare, but and again, perhaps the boy on the raft. It has to be something has to be coming, doesn't it? But the head in the bottom of the boat, Christ, that's still. Oh God, yeah. I still tend to look away. And obviously, who can ever forget? We're gonna need a bigger boat. Yeah, classic stuff. And obviously, the fact that the mechanical shark, which didn't work. Functioned as possible, forced them to improvise on the set. Worked very much to the film's favor. It's true with all horror, isn't it? I mean, real true horror is what it suggests to the mind. Watch a Val Lewton film, you'll get the point. People, being shredded by knives and or terrorized by axe wielding madmen. It's not really horror. It's just gross, isn't it? But horror is a psychological thing. It's because there are far more terrors in the mind than there are out there in the world. And there are some pretty terrifying things out there in the world. But no, I mean, one has to be honest. I think that worked very much to the film's advantage. And it keeps, and they managed to keep it going for 2 hours. I mean, the shark was, today looking at it, it is just so delightfully wobbly, isn't it? But I'm sorry, there is not a CGI shark I've ever seen in any film that really compares to it. There is something to be said for real special effects. And the other film I often refer to if this subject comes up is John Carpenter's The Thing. It still convinces all these years later, as does Jaws. Yes, it's entertainment. You're going to suspend a little bit of disbelief while you're watching the film. It does, on occasion, look like what it is. But Christ on a bike, it scared me at the time, and I know I'm not alone there. But the fact that we only saw it fleetingly, well, obviously it covered up the perhaps imperfections of the motor, and added more to the psychological tension. But even when you get to see it close up at the end, come on, really, it's not that bad. And also, who can forget John Williams' absolutely amazing score? Even Spielberg admitted, that Jaws would not have been half the film it was if it wasn't for that. Genius, really, isn't it? 2 notes. Anybody who hasn't even seen the film, once they hear that, they know exactly what it's referring to. It must be one of the best soundtracks ever. It's got a really good ending as well. The ending in the book was, I'm afraid, rather tame. Even on the page when you're reading it, the shark honing in to finish off Brody to see if police chief tastes any different to grizzled shark hunter. It just dies of its wounds within meters of him. It's really, is that all you could think of, Mr. Benchley? It is a very tame ending, and Spielberg, rightly, consigned that to the dustbin. Said, "No, this will never do," and a much more dramatic ending, was required and was produced. And again, who will ever forget? Smile, you son of a bitch. It's a great ending. To a great film. The fact that shooting a scuba tank with a rifle is probably guaranteed not to make it explode is beside the point. This is entertainment. This is not a documentary. Nobody's writing a PhD based on this. At least I fucking hope they're not. Perfectly scripted, perfectly paced, as I've said. It runs like clockwork. And there's not a lazy piece of casting or a bad performance by anybody, from the start to the poor old Harry with a bad hat. Everybody's convincing, and there's some really great moments in it. The 3 characters in particular, you get to know them. There's enough character development in the film. You get to know them as people. You can relate to them. You can sympathize with them. Even the slimy politician he's not done in a stereotypical way. It's conceivable. You kind of understand his position up to a point, but everything is performed. All roles are well cast, well written, and performed, I think, extremely well. Even when it comes down to Quint, who, let's be fair, even in the book, was a cut and paste Captain Ahab. Herman Melville's been long dead. Otherwise, he may have had a case. No, and that's not really helped by Ahab's death in the book, where he gets he gets his leg tangled up in the cord of the harpoon, and the shark drags him under the water and drowns him. Very, very similar to Ahab's demise in Moby Dick. And again, Spielberg decided this will never do. But we'll get on to that. The three leads are really worth discussing. Perfect. Really inhabit their roles, don't they? Cannot really think of anybody doing this. Now, we all know, I don't think any of them were particularly first choice. Dreyfuss may have been one of the original. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Certainly, Robert Shaw was not first choice. They offered that to Lee Marvin, to Sterling Hayden, and they, for various reasons, declined. I think they offered Robert Duvall Brody, but he didn't. He wanted to play Quint. He didn't want to play the leading man, as it were. Again, you can't today imagine anybody else in any of those roles whatsoever. But one has to say Robert Duvall. Yeah, he probably made a pretty good fist of whatever he was given. But the real reason for me that this film stands out is Robert Shaw. What an amazing performance. It may not quite have been the Quint as described in the book, but I think for once we can ignore fidelity and acknowledge that the film did a far better job. I mean, Shaw is just what an actor, what presence, what screen charisma, what power, what passion, and subtlety even in his performance. You might think of it as being over the top, but you just watch him a couple of times, those little moments, the little sarcastic comments or the occasional look where half, almost about to admit that maybe Hooper has a point. Almost. Unfortunately, he doesn't, not until it's too late. But no, an absolutely gripping performance. And you can't mention Shaw and his performance without referring to the Indianapolis speech, can you? It is absolutely no secret anymore that he was heavily involved in the writing of it. And being the extremely accomplished author and playwright that he was, it's no surprise that it was of that high quality. But the delivery of it is absolutely amazing. And you see Dreyfuss in the background. And even he's admitted he was not acting. He was spellbound. And rightly so. And when you think, not that I'm a great fan of these things, acting awards and stuff like that, it's far too subjective. I mean, who decides who gives the best performance? But anyway, I mean, my opinion doesn't count. But when you think of some of the vapid, innocuous, vacuous performances, both before and of more recent vintage, that have been awarded with a gong, be it an Oscar, a BAFTA, a Palme d'Or, whatever, and you think that Shaw was not even nominated, it rather puts those sort of things in perspective, does it not? Rather like awarding Henry Kissinger the Nobel Peace Prize. Was it Spielberg's best film? I was about to say, yeah, possibly. I have to, as I mentioned earlier, they changed the character of Quint from the novel, and they realized he had to be given some motivation for this anti-shark mania, which is where the Indianapolis speech obviously came from. They also changed his death scene, and the death scene in the movie, I'm not going to describe it because I'm convinced we've all seen it at least 20 times. It was far more effective and far more appropriate to the demands of cinema than the rather tepid description of Quint's demise that Benchley provided in the original novel. Yeah, again, I think there's plenty of channels and stuff out there if anybody really wants, and documentaries. Anybody coming new to this, there's certainly nothing or just about anybody else I would have thought can add to that. It's been covered in depth and very well. There's a great channel, the Daily Jaws, who have a myriad of content by this point, covering Well, that's just about everything. I think what they haven't covered is probably not of any particular relevance or interest. But no, a great film on any and all level. But for me, as I said, it really is Robert Shaw that elevates this. You could actually have made this film with three lesser leads, and it still would have been a great film because the story and everything is that good. The direction, the plot, everything is that good. The stars really aligned on this occasion. However, Dreyfus, Scheider, and especially Robert Shaw. And where do you get actors like that today? Uh, do you can you think of anybody since then that has that screen presence, that has that animal magnetism about him? I mean, he wouldn't have fed too well these days, would he? He's far too masculine, far too comfortable in his sexuality. But God, his career would have been over before it started. But no, a magnificent performance from Shaw. And again, yeah, you know, 50 years later, I know, okay, you could say people are still talking about Nosferatu, Birth of a Nation, Citizen Kane, which obviously predate this by a long way. But these are, generally held up as artistic works. Whereas, Jaws was a thriller or a horror film. The first summer blockbuster, as it turned out. And we're still talking about the bloody thing, 50 years later. And there has to be a reason for that. And I think if you're watching this, you probably agree with me. It's worth it. Slight worry here. If you look at what Hollywood are churning out, and have been churning out for what seems to be the past decade, there's a complete dearth of original material. If the film's not a franchise or a sequel or something, it seems very difficult to get it made. And they are, all coming to diminishing returns. I mean, they already have completely fucked up the Star Wars IP, haven't they? Indiana Jones not far behind. Okay, the Jaws sequels perhaps were not the greatest things ever, ever committed to celluloid, but never mind. One has a fear that at some point, some dumbass is going to have the idea of remaking Jaws, and all I can say is, whoever this is, please have them arrested, committed to an asylum, anything, whatever it takes. Do not ever let anybody try and remake this film, ever. Anyway, what do you think? You agree? You disagree? Am I overselling it? Am I underselling it? Well, anyway, you let me know in the comments. There'll be more film stuff to come, which will be totally at random, and it will be reflecting my own somewhat eclectic tastes. And if you want an indication what that means, Jaws is probably as mainstream as I will get. But anyway, be warned or be intrigued, however you take that. So, feel free to comment, to like, to subscribe, to share, all those good things that cost nothing. Don't involve you chucking chum over the side of a boat. Well, until next time, I thank you very much for your indulgence. I wish you well, and here's to those fair Spanish ladies. Maçhonquèrre.